Access to education for refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa remains problematic. And although they are entitled to seek and to receive education in South Africa in terms of the Constitution as well as the Refugee Act, there's still discrepancies between the realities as well as the laws that are put in place. Molweni, welcome to it. You are watching Conversations with Africa Unite right here on Cape Town TV. Today we look into some of the challenges that are faced by young migrants, specifically in accessing higher education in the country. And to help us unpack all of this, we have Mr. Bruce Chikotsa in studio, and he will be sharing not only his knowledge, but also his experience with regards to accessing higher education in South Africa. Now, before we get into the conversation, please do remember to get in the conversation with us. Join in on our social media conversations on our Instagram. Remember, we are official_Africa Unite. On Twitter, we are Africa_Unite_ZA. And on Facebook, we are Africa Unite. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Lelethu, and thank you so much, viewers, for having me.
Great. Now, please tell me, what do you think are some of the most common challenges that are faced by specifically young people when it comes to accessing higher education in South Africa?
Okay. To speak about that, I think the best option or the best place to start is to just look at myself or the experiences which I had to go through in accessing education, because I actually studied my tertiary education here in South Africa at the University of the Western Cape.
Yeah.
So there are certain challenges, a number of them which I faced, and I have no doubt that other students as well that are in different institutions pursuing their tertiary education are facing exactly the same challenges. So for me, I think one of the challenges that was huge, that affected me a lot, was when one wanted to pay for their tuition. One thing that the institutions tends to do is to require that students pay the entire fee of education for the entire year, from the beginning of the year. So that is a challenge, because mostly when people are processing their studying permits and everything that they require for them to study, they expend a lot of money in order to do that. And then to go to the institutions, and then you are required to pay an entire amount. Like for me, the first year I had to pay about 32,000.
So that would be the upfront payment for the whole year.
Yes. So for you to be registered, you had to pay an entire 30-something thousand or more in some institutions, which is a challenge, because if maybe you are allowed to pay part of that, just maybe the registration fee, which was about 1,000.5 the time that I studied, and then pay the entire fees as the year goes, that would make it easy for people to actually afford education, even though they are from outside the country. But the policies of these institutions, where they require you to pay an entire amount of money from the onset, it actually amounts to prohibition of access to education, which is, in my opinion, not supposed to be the case. If you look at the Constitution...
Isn't there any leniency? Like, don't they give you like a payment plan sort of, as you know, as they do with South African nationals? I know South African nationals, you are allowed to have some leniency. They would say maybe pay the registration, we can do debit orders. So when it comes to migrants, they would then require you to pay everything up front, no leniency whatsoever.
Yes. So with migrants, they don't give you that option.
Wow.
Where they can actually allow you to make a payment plan. You do not have that. You have to pay an entire amount of fee from the onset before you could be even registered. Mind you, registration allows you to be able to access facilities, the library, the resource centers, a lot of other institutions, or a lot of other aspects that
even
you need
just
to
the
access
portals as well,
Yes.
and the emails.
You are required to be registered for you to be able to do that. But if you are not registered, that means that you cannot access those, which is in one way or the other prohibits you to actually study in a way.
Wow. And then isn't there maybe any bursaries or special scheme? I know with South African students, for instance, they would get NSFAS, and there's a lot of other ways to assist them financially. So there's no aid whatsoever for migrant?
So for migrants, the challenge that we also encounter is to do with those bursaries, because generally the bursaries that are offered by the state or by the government are inclined to helping citizens, basically, and probably people that have managed to attain permanent residence,
Yeah.
which is also another challenge to obtain.
Yes.
So a lot of students get excluded because they do not meet the requirements or the criteria
For
that
the
is set for them
bursaries.
to obtain bursaries.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then how then have you managed, because I know you're doing your master's now, how have you managed to pay all those fees and still continue to study and obtain your degree with all the stringent, policies?
So for me, how I managed to do it, I was actually working full-time.
Wow.
And studying. So I was working in restaurants when I was doing my undergrad. So I had to work full-time and start full-time because the program that I was pursuing, which is LLB then, required you to actually do it full-time, no part-time. So I had to work full-time and start full-time.
Wow.
So it is a challenge for many because I was actually fortunate that I managed to get a job. And that place where I was working, they were able to understand that I was studying and they were able to, fit me in their schedule so that I can actually go and study.
And be more flexible.
Yes, but for a lot of students or potential students, that is not always the case.
Yeah. Wow. So that's very, very interesting, but let's park that for now. We will have, a bit more after the break. After the break, we continue speaking about some of the challenges that are faced by, young migrants as they try to access higher education in the country. Please do not go away. We still have Bruce in studio, and he'll be talking much more about his experiences as well as some of the experiences of fellow migrants going in tertiary educations as well as going through all of that. Please don't go away. Stay tuned. And welcome back. We are still talking to Mr. Bruce Chikwota. He is a master's candidate in mercantile law at the University of the Western Cape. He's also a migrant from Zimbabwe, and he's sharing his experience as well as some of the realities and the challenges that he has faced in trying to access higher education in the country. Now, Bruce, you were still talking to us about some of the challenges, right, that you have faced. But now I would like for our viewers out there to please not forget to let us know on our social media pages, what are some of the challenges that you have faced back at home in accessing a higher education as a young migrant? Please let us know. Don't forget, on our Instagram, we are official_Africa Unite. On our Twitter, we are Africa_Unite_ZA. And on Facebook, we are Africa Unite. Bruce, now you mentioned one of the challenges being the finance side of things, that people usually do not have that amount that is required in terms of the policies in institutions. And I'm assuming this is all the institutions in the country, right?
Yes.
At least for you, it was the University of the Western Cape where you are required to pay the whole fee upfront. Now, what else, what other challenges are there besides the finance aspect? And I know, obviously, the finance part is the most important one, but what are some of the other challenges that you faced trying to get into UWC?
Okay. Some of the challenges include the policies, basically, that are implemented by the government. For instance, for you to be able to study, you need your papers to be normalized, they say. That is, to be brought down to the standard or to be viewed in the standard of South African education system.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, generally, the time that I did it, which I'm sure it is still the same, is that you have to go to Pretoria to get your papers processed. That is, I had to go to a department called HISA.
So you had to physically go to Pretoria?
I had to physically go there.
Wow.
And I would think that if that is to be decentralized in such a way that the institutions themselves can carry out those activities, it will save a lot of migrants, because most of these migrants that are here, the challenge is that they leave their countries to come here. Some of them is economic. So if you have to travel around the country to get certain things that the government could simply decentralize, that could be something that can be beneficial. But that as it may, it was actually a challenge, and I think it is a challenge that is affecting a lot of people in my situation.
Yeah, because also it requires money for you to travel to Pretoria and to actually, get to that institution, right? But with regards to that, how long did it take then for you to get that normalization, as they call it?
Because I had to go there, it took 1 day.
Okay.
So
okay,
I just went
that's-
there and then I got it. So it didn't take that long. But the
Okay.
fact that you have to travel
Yeah,
from one
I can imagine.
province to another to get that sorted out, it could be a challenge for many.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And so would you say there are any other challenges then besides that?
Yeah, I think, like I said, the main reason some of these people are coming into South Africa is because they are seeking economic solutions to their problems.
Yeah.
And most of them, they do not work a lot of good jobs.
Yeah.
They do these small jobs working in restaurants and the likes. And finances are always a challenge.
Yeah.
One of the things that I also encountered as a challenge is the process that one has to go through to apply for a permit.
Yeah.
You have to have a medical aid, you have to have police clearances from both sides, you have to have, the process itself is quite expensive.
Yeah.
You have to have medical aid and all those kind of things. For medical aid, you are required to pay an entire year. Sometimes some of these students, some of their parents or students, like for me, in my case, I had to pay it myself.
Yeah.
So for you to actually get for you to get a permit, the process that you have to go through is quite expensive. And then when you go into institutions, you then face the challenge that I told you earlier, where you have to pay an entire amount of fees from the onset,
Yeah.
which compound the problem of finances that students from other countries or migrant students face when they come here. At the end of the day, if you add all that together, it will amount to an actual denial. So I would suggest that the solutions. We'll talk
Yes,
about them. Okay.
I was just about to go there actually.
Alright.
Just quickly though, so most of it is financial, right?
Most of it is finance.
Because
and
I can
policy.
imagine for it, obviously you were sort of an economic migrant, but what happens to refugees as well as asylum seekers? I'm sure it's much worse, right? Especially in terms of the documentation and all of that, because obviously there's other different processes. But personally for you, what kind of solutions do you think should be implemented, especially by government and institutions? And I know you've touched a bit on the one of centralizing the system where you have to be normalized, right? So that could be one of the solutions. But what other solutions do you think can be put in place?
So I would think the first thing that has to happen is for institutions to actually to be flexible enough to cater for people from outside. I do not know what is the reason behind them assuming a policy where they ask you to pay their entire
whole
amount
amount
of fees from the onset. But whatever that may be, I would suggest that it would be more beneficial to the society of migrants that are here in South Africa if they could be allowed to have some certain arrangements when it comes to the payment of fees.
Yeah.
Instead of paying an entire amount from the onset, they then can maybe allow them to pay, at least maybe a certain percentage, which is affordable. Then they can pay the rest during the course of the year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So more stringent policies, and that obviously is at an institutional level. So institutions of a higher learning have to relook their policies, right?
Yes.
Then now, what would you say on a sort of national level, maybe government, what can government do, perhaps?
So for the government, I think if you check what the Constitution says about the right to access to education is provided for in terms of Section 29, it allows everyone that is within the vicinity of South Africa access to education.
Yeah.
So I would say, in order for that right to be freely enjoyed by everyone that lives or is within the boundaries of South Africa, policies also have to complement that. And when it comes to the normalization that I said, I would suggest that maybe if I were to implement a policy, I would try to make it possible and make it accessible by probably decentralizing the service, so that institutions are given power, or they have people from the relevant education departments to be in institutions during the time of registration and stuff to help students, with checking the papers and making sure that the papers are normalized without having to require students to travel halfway through the country to obtain the service.
Yeah.
So I think bring the service to institutions so that institutions can do it at the benefit of our students.
Great. Thank you so much, Bruce. Let's continue this conversation right after the break. At home, please let us know, what do you think are some of the solutions to the issue of the challenges that migrants face when trying to access higher education in South Africa? Please do not forget to join in on these conversations on our social media. We really want to know what you think. Join in on our Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. We will see you right after the break. Bruce is not going anywhere, and after the break he'll be talking about his story and how he got into South Africa, and obviously, having mentioned some of the challenges that he's faced, he will be dwelling more on that. Please, we'll catch you after the break. Don't go away. And welcome back. We are still talking about all things access to higher education for migrant learners in South Africa. And Bruce is about to share his story of how he came into South Africa. And he's currently actually doing his master's in mercantile law at the University of the Western Cape, and he did his undergrad there as well. He'll be sharing his story and some of the challenges he has encountered. Please do not forget to join in on our social media pages. Let us know what you think about today's topic. Let us know what you think are the solutions to some of the challenges that young migrants face when they try to access higher education in South Africa. Also, let us know what some of the challenges that you have faced back at home have been in trying to access higher education. Now, Bruce, we've been talking about some of the challenges you have faced, right? Now, we haven't touched on where you're from, how you got to South Africa, because I'm sure every migrant has their own different stories, and obviously, and the challenges would be, obviously unique to your story and to whoever's story. But with you, how did you get to South Africa, and why did you come to South Africa? Where did you come from?
Okay. I come from Zimbabwe.
Okay.
That's where I come from. And the reason why I came, in actual fact, when I came for the very first time, I thought that I was just going to come and spend maybe 6 months here, raise some money to buy myself stationery and maybe some equipment that I needed for my university back home.
Yeah.
Because I had applied at home and I had gotten a place at one of the institutions at home.
Okay.
But the time that I went there were a lot of challenges that we had then. There was no food at the institutions, at the institution, and there was no water, there was no electricity. As a result of that,
At the whole institution.
at the whole institution, yeah. So as a result of that, the institution could not open. They closed it indefinitely until they were able to get the institution to function. So I thought to myself, let me go to South Africa for 6 months and then work there if I can find something to do, earn some money, buy myself stationery and some of the equipment like laptops and stuff that I would need to pursue my studies with. And then I came here. It took longer for the institution to open. I ended up staying here longer than that. And it took also long for me to find something to do here.
Yeah.
So when I've managed to find something to do and the institutions at home had opened, I could not go back. I had to work and raise money, hoping that I would raise enough money and pay for my studies here.
Yeah.
Didn't happen as I thought. I had to work for about 2.5 years before I could be able to even contemplate studying.
Yeah.
So I then managed to start. I applied in 2013 first at the institution, which is the University of the Western Cape, to study. I studied there for about 6 months. But because I was working night shift, and also the money that I was earning then was not enough for me to pay for my fees, I had to drop out.
Wow.
And then I had to reapply again in 2017.
Yeah. After 3 years.
After 3 years. And then I started my studies then, and I was able to complete my studies in 2020.
Okay.
At least there, it was a little bit better in terms of the work environment that I was subjected to, as well as the money that I was earning was a little bit higher than what I earned when I started in 2013.
Wow.
So it managed to help me to pay for my fees and complete my studies.
Yeah.
And then when I did my master's, I think you mentioned that now, I was fortunate enough to be able to get a scholarship. It's called a graduate lecturing assistant scholarship that they offer at the University of the Western Cape, where you tutor students in undergrad, and then they will pay for your fees. So I was fortunate to get that, and as a result of that, I was able to pursue my master's a little bit comfortably as compared to
Yeah.
what I went through in order to obtain my LLB, which is my honors degree.
Yeah.
So that's basically my story. At the moment, I'm actually trying to start my LLD, which is PhD.
Oh, wow. So you've completed the master's?
Yes, I completed it recently in September.
Wow, great.
So that's basically my story. But yeah.
What advice would you then, because you've been so successful in your academic career despite the challenges, right? Then what advice would you give anyone back at home as to what they can and should do in order to also, face the challenges and complete their education just like you have? I mean, PhD is not child's play. It's huge.
Yeah. So my advice to many people out there or to our listeners is that one thing that you can do is to be resilient. You will face challenges along the way, and if you are resilient enough and willing to continue, even if you are knocked down, there is absolutely nothing that you can't do. Because in my case, I encountered a lot of challenges, but I stayed focused because I knew what I wanted. So also that is another thing that you can actually consider, to actually know what you want. Because if you know what you want, even if you face challenges, you always find a way to persist until you are able to attain whatever it is that you wish to. Because you know what you want, and then you will be strong enough to go and do it. And also, one of the things that I think is important is to try things. Because for me, before I started, I inquired about the potential of one studying here, and the information that I got from people that I spoke to, especially people that were not informed. They will tell you that it's not possible, it's impossible. And if you listen to that and don't try and don't go out there to inquire and get information that is relevant, you may never try. So
true.
Be able to try things and be able to go out and find information for yourself. And if you can do that, I don't really see anyhow that you may not be able to attain whatever that you want to do.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Bruce. Now, one last question for me is that what do you think can be done, especially with the relationship with South Africa and Zimbabwe, to work better in terms of this whole situation on higher education? What do you think can be done? What sort of policies do you think can be put in place in order for people to, not face as much challenges, right? What do you think can be done in that regard?
Well, I think I am personally a person who believes so much in integration, that is regional integration, or integration among states. And we are fortunate enough that South Africa and Zimbabwe, they form part of a regional integrated group called SADC. So taking that into consideration, I think what we need, or what countries need to do, that is Zimbabwe and South Africa, or countries within the SADC region, is probably work together. Not only in economic terms, but also in education terms, because for us to work better economically, education cannot be negated. We have to consider education in one way or the other, because it is key to countries working together. So I would think that one of the things that can be done between South Africa and Zimbabwe is to make sure that they probably standardize the education system such that there are no discrepancies in between that has to be filled somewhere, somehow. By standardizing.
And not just South Africa and Zimbabwe, right? The whole SADC region would work much better in that regard. Okay, great.
So that's what I think needs to be done. Obviously, among other things, there's a lot more that can be done.
A lot more. Thank you so much, Bruce, for joining us. I wish we had more time. This is a very interesting discussion. But back at home, please don't forget to also join in on this conversation on our social media pages, because it doesn't end here. We continue on the social media pages. Please let us know what you think can be done by the SADC region in order to try and standardize a whole education system to make it easier for migrants living in South Africa to access higher education. It has been great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next week with some more very interesting topics on migrants and everything, all the lowdown from the xenophobic attacks to access to education, as you have seen today. We'll be discussing all of that. Please stay tuned for the next week. See you next time. Bye.